Hi, today I'd like to show my process for editing and blending Seascape images using a combination of Lightroom and Photoshop. Once I've chosen my set of similar images, I do lens correction on the first image. Then I go back to grid view and I'll sync these settings to all the images, holding down the Shift key on my Mac and selecting the remaining images. Then click Sync Settings on the bottom right hand side and check None and check Lens Correction Only and click OK. Now I make some basic adjustments. I set my black point on my image. I also set my white point on my image, and I set the white balance to cloudy to warm up the image. I'll pull back some shadow detail, and I'll also reduce the highlights to show up some more detail in the sea and the sky. I'll repeat this process then for all three images. And once I've done that, I can go back into library mode, select the three images, and right click, and I can then select Open as Layers in Photoshop. Now I have three layers in Photoshop. I can align them by selecting the three of them, and in the Edit menu select Auto Align Layers. So now that I have my layers aligned, I can plan how I want to blend the best parts of each image into my final image. To do this, I find it useful to create a sketch for each layer. So I'll draw just with a brush, I'll draw around the area of the image that I want to keep. Doing this also slows me down and helps me think more about the details and the merits of each image while I'm editing. So I'll do three plans, one for each layer. Call this one my base layer. And I'll compare it to the next layer. And I'll just take a middle section out of that. Call it my mid-layer plan. And do the same for the top layer. And it's mostly the sky and the top of the rocks that I'm going to use here. So with my three plans, I'll go back to my base layer. I'll add a mask to this layer, and then I'll select the brush in black, and I will just remove the area of the image on the mask that I don't want to keep. And I'll just reduce the brush size and make sure I get the areas I want. On the second layer, I do this, but now because of less area that I want to keep, I'm just going to invert the mask, and then using a white brush this time, I'm going to brush in the area I want to keep. And then finally on the top layer, I'll hold down the Alt key and click on the new mask. And that gives me the inverted layer straight off. And I'll just keep the sky and a little bit of the sea and rocks with the splashes I like. So now I don't need my plans anymore, and I have my basic image. Next, what I'm going to do is just try and preserve some of the edges that I lost in the alignment. So I can just quickly take that rock out, use content aware fill, hold down the shift and F5, click OK. That leaves a slight line. If you zoom in, you'll see the line, and I use a spot healing brush then just to clear up that. I'll do it very roughly this time. You try and just make sure they blend as well as possible. So I'm going to repeat, go around the image and use content aware fill just to preserve the edges. Real quick. And on the next one, rather than using the lasso, I'm just going to use a rectangle selection. And then I'll just use the spot healing, take out some of the cables I don't like, any items you don't like, zoom in when you need to do some detailed area. There's still some cables there. So this part is just standard editing, cleaning up any bits of the landscape that don't really add anything to the image. I'm just using the clone stamp as well. And once I've done that, I'll go around my image and check for dust spots and other undesirables. I have a couple of them, not too many. And again, I'll use content aware fill to remove them. So that's my basic image now. And what I want to do now is create a retouching layer with a macro or an action, and that gives me also all of these channels. So I'm going to select the darkest and the lightest channel, or deselect those, and then just when I run my defog, it's running defog on the areas of the image that are not too dark or light, so they don't get blocked. And then what I'll do next then is just add a gray layer with soft light, so I can just brush in darker or lighter areas with a default black or white brush. Quite soft, quite large. And then just some highlighted areas in white. And when I'm happy with that, just darken down the sides. I can do an image stamp and then decide what next needs to happen. I'll sharpen the image. When you're sharpening an image, you really need to check the image and be happy with the sharpening you've done. So next I'll just add vibrancy, not too much. Another image stamp, and then I'll just do one final vignette. And for this, I'm just going to reduce this back to around 50%. And I'm happy with that. I can select all of my layers, and then I can flatten my image. I'll also remove those channels that were added as well. And that's my final image, ready to go. Thanks for watching.